Hey everybody, my name is Dan Abdo,
I'm Brian Herrick.
and today we are talking about This Was Our Pact by Ryan Andrews, this amazing graphic novel published by First Second Books.
We're going to go through the whole thing and talk about the craft and the meaning behind the book and what we loved about it, and we're just going to give you the blow-by-blow of the whole book.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about This Was Our Pact by Ryan Andrews. And what would you say that who's this book directed towards?
That's a great question. I guess it feels like maybe YA, but I think middle grade kids would like it too. But I loved it, and I'm way older than any of those ages, so I think it's a coming of age tale in a way. So it might work for all ages, honestly.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've got two kids, and I think when I gave it to them, they were probably like 8. And I think they were not, it was a little bit too much for them.
Same with my now almost 11-year-old. He read it 2 years ago. But then he reread it like a few weeks ago, and he got more out of it. So I think it covers a lot of ground, age-wise, I think.
I mean, when I first opened it up, the thing that I was struck most by was the artwork.
Yeah.
Like, I think it is so beautiful. Like, Ryan Andrews, I wasn't actually really familiar with his work before I read this, but I think he lives in Japan.
Yep.
And like it has this it's like I think it's pencil. It's like colored in the computer, but all these like really beautiful pencil drawings, really gorgeous compositions. Like the cartooning it's great. It's awesome.
I read the whole book before I ended up reading his notes at the beginning. He says he uses a pencil. I actually have one. We can pull it out in a minute here. I went out and bought it because I was like, well, that's how you do graphic novel.
Nice.
I just want to point out the first thing that got me is, and I missed it the first time I read it, is right there. Rule 1, no one turns for home. Rule 2, no one looks back. And that's the pact. This is our pact. This is our pact. So he just right away is like, this is the pact the whole book is based on. And I think, and we could talk more about it, but I think that's like the armature. That's what the whole book is based on, is this notion that these kids are growing up. And I think you could read into those two rules a lot of different ways.
Totally. Yeah, so we were talking about this a little bit before we started, but Brian and I are both big fans of Brian McDonald, who is a author, comic book author, screenwriter, and he's also written a bunch of works about screenwriting and story structure. And he actually has, so this was published by First Second Books. Brian McDonald also has a couple books by First Second Books.
Right.
And so Brian McDonald has kind of like, he has this really great way of talking about story structure, and one of his main ideas is armature.
Yeah, his book Invisible Ink, which you turned me on to, is fantastic. And that notion of an armature is what the whole concept of a story hangs on, right?
Yeah. And it's basically like, the way that he describes it is that it's one idea, and it's like this thing that like, as the author, you can keep on coming back to one idea. Like every element of your story is serving this one idea, right? And in this story, like Brian Herrick was just saying, rule 1, no one turns for home. Rule 2, no one looks back. But I guess like, I was kind of thinking like that is, like there's an idea behind that.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like the slogan or like the kid like version of it. But what does that mean?
Right, yes. And I'm curious to how you interpret it, but for me, I feel like, and we'll get into this as we go through the book, but I feel like the whole idea is these guys, this is leaving childhood and going into adulthood.
Totally.
And that's, you're not turning for home, you can't go back, and you have to grow up. And there's a lot of confusing, mixed feelings around that. And I feel like that's what this book kind of sums up.
I don't know. I think that's 100% right. And I think that totally brings us to this like really interesting part here where it's like, so these kids are all on this bike adventure together. It's like they were part of this festival where they were putting these lanterns into the river, and now they're chasing these lanterns to see where they go down the river. But so there's this one part here where there's another kid who wants to join them, but they won't let him, and they're calling him a nerd alert, and like they're excluding him, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, for me, I was like, oh, that felt accurate to being a kid, right? And it's like that pain of like childhood, and when you're a kid, like you don't have context of like, oh, you'll grow out of this, or this is just one of many traumas and pains. It's like as big as anything is, right?
So, and we've all probably been on one side or the other, either being the nerd or excluding the nerd. But maybe we like to think that we were never excluding anyone, but I think this book does a good job of including that vulnerability of like, there's the kid left behind and the other kid who kind of does the excluding, and they have to kind of meet in the middle, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Totally. But I think it comes back to the armature too, which is like, okay, if you can't go home, no one turns back and no one goes home.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And like that's the journey from childhood to adulthood. Like how are you going to behave on that journey? Like how are you going to like, comport yourself on that journey?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Absolutely.
And so then I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I just love how and I feel like this is also something that I see in his writing and his artwork is like this idea of a mission.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like we have this like very like gridded, but his screen direction is amazing too. But like you have this very like gridded out page, right? And it's like, it's really easy to read. The screen direction is really beautiful, and like you get into this rhythm, and then it changes.
Yeah,
and it'll be like these huge
big splash pages.
These big splash pages where it's like going off the edge, and like it's just
beautiful. This scale down here, like they're there on their bikes, and he's doing this classic. He's probably a child of the '80s or the '90s or the '70s or something. They've like, it's a little like E.T. or something, like they're all on their dirt bikes, and there's the kid left behind, right?
Right, it's like this huge bar in between them, like it's like this gulf. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's so good.
It's just remarkable, and the color palette is fantastic. It's like kind of a limited. We were talking about it beforehand, and I was saying it was full of color, and you were like limited palette, and then I went and I was like, it is kind of limited palette, but he switches it, and so he uses color to really point out certain moments.
You know what it reminds me of? Did you ever see that Pixie documentary, Loud, Quiet, Loud?
No, I never did see that, actually.
It's awesome, but it's like, part of the idea is that like the way that the Pixies created drama and tension and all this stuff in their music is that it was loud, quiet, loud.
Like dissonance.
And he does the exact same thing, right? Where it's like you get used to this rhythm and then it'll change.
Yeah.
And this idea too of like the streetlights turning on at night.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, that is childhood.
Totally.
Do you remember that when the streetlights turned on? It was like,
and if you caught it, you caught a magic moment.
Yeah,
and
totally.
everybody would just sort of stop and stare.
Yeah. This is a really interesting part of the story too, because so he's got this group of kids, right? And they've all made this pact together, and now some of the kids are starting to fall off.
Yep.
Right? And these kids are like, oh, it's taco night. Like, we can't miss it. Like, we have to go back.
Yeah. And when I reread the book too, I was like, my recollection was that they had been together for a long time, but it happens pretty quickly, actually. This is page 17, and the kids are all turning back, as you said, but suddenly it's kind of left just down to these two kids on their bikes. I guess they're still here.
Right.
They meet this river.
Yeah, so I made a note here. I was like, this is the literal threshold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
it's like they literally have this thing where it's like you either cross this part and after that, like, you can't turn back or you turn back. And it's so funny here, too. There's this weird thing where there are these frogs on this bridge.
I never even noticed those.
And so my wife, she grew up in this town, Windham, Connecticut, and they have this bridge there that have these pillars just like this with these spools of thread, because it was like a textile town.
Yeah.
And on top of the thread are these big frogs. Huh. And I was like, oh, it's just a weird coincidence. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it also makes me, there's like, I think that it makes me think of Miyazaki's work a little bit too, and it comes up in a few places, but these totems, and maybe it's just the influence of Ryan Andrews living in Japan, but what's happening here now is we cross into like some magic realism as they're kind of talking about if they're going to stay together or if they're going to go back, and there's this big creature here that is watching them, which is kind of spooky, but it's what is that? And we never really learn. It doesn't. Nothing comes of it, but it tells us. Oh, that's right. In the cave. In the cave.
Yeah.
But it's not literal. This is not like, I feel like, or it's this opportunity when we realize we're in a different world. Up until now, it seemed like a real world, and now we're crossing like the threshold into magical realism, and we're something different is happening.
Yeah, totally. It's totally like the real world and the underworld, right? Or like the normal world and the extraordinary world. And like this, like he represents, or this creature represents like, I don't know, the anxieties of growing up or something like that. But like, yeah, you're right. He's totally a creature of the underworld.
I don't even know what all.
Yeah, what did I write?
Sorry, yeah. The page composition.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. I thought this was an awesome example of screen direction, page, or you know, right, like the eye line, right? So it's like you're moving right to left, but then he adds this panel and just changes the angle a little bit. So now you're shooting down here, and now the bridge is going across, right? I mean, like I when I'm making a comic, I'm often kind of racking my brain is how do I make this, especially when it's two people talking, how do you make it interesting?
Yeah, right.
How is it more than like over the shoulder or left, right, head on? And so like here he does this thing where it's like bird's eye, you're looking at the river and you're looking at these lanterns go by. Then you're like worm's eye, right? Because they're talking about how tall, how high they are up. Yeah. And then you're back with them again. And so it's like left to right and then river left to right. It just is like, it's just awesome.
I mean, I think a lot of times the solution is to give tasks to your characters so they're doing something, but they're just having a conversation. And yet this is, like you say, it's so dynamic. All of the different camera angles are just wild. And it makes the page just move.
Yeah, it's really great. So so it's funny when he does the single page spreads too, he's also breaking the border.
Right, it bleeds out.
Yeah.
Nice use of negative space right there too. And these guys are like starting to develop. We're down to 2 the characters. And they're starting to talk to each other, but they're still like on some shaky ground, I think, like in terms of are they friends, are they not friends? And then they meet this bear, which again, we're like, okay, magical realism. There's a bear wearing a scarf and a suit with a giant basket.
Yeah, no, that's a great note. Like, it's like this character, I think Nathan or Nathaniel, I forget what his name is. It's Ben and Nathaniel.
I think it's Nathaniel. Yeah,
he's the nerd. He's the kid who was left behind, but they have like a history together. Like they used to be friends.
Right, yeah, that's right. And I think I forgot that the first time I had read it, but they talk about their parents are friends too, so they're like old family friends.
Right. And it is sometimes like those kids that you grew up with that were almost like friends of obligation. You're you're kind of like, is this my friend? But like maybe sometimes those are the best friends.
Look at that bear's shadow looming over them right there.
That's
like
awesome.
They don't know what's going on. They've just met this bear. Is he kind? Is he dangerous?
And he's totally a creature of this extraordinary world. Like he's on his own mission, which kind of parallels their mission, right? It's like he just kind of like inherited this job from his dad, which is catching these fish. So he's like the first time. It's like he's there for the first time as well.
There's that color again too, and he's thinking, what if the basket is full of kids? We're seeing in his imagination right now, and so they use the red to sort of. And it can be a little spooky here, but we then very quickly realize the bear is actually kind. But I think this is an aspect of childhood too, of like being afraid of what is coming at you. And is this situation okay? Is this situation not okay?
Yeah, totally. It's scary. I love how like it's like I'm often when I'm coloring my work, it's like I want to color it in.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
The colors.
Yeah, it's like totally. You're like, oh, this is this color, that is. But it's like I love how it's just like it's all lighting and mood, and the color is just like serving the story. It's so great.
And it's limited palette. It's like each page. It's not just that it's all blue. There's lots of blues and lots of purples, but it is. You're right. He's not throwing every color at it. It's a really nice solution, and then you skip, like look how beautiful that is.
Yeah,
it's just like extraordinary. Those stars.
And this is kind of some foreshadowing too, right? Like there's this parallel between like the road that they're biking on, the river that contains the lanterns and fish, and then this like arm of the Milky Way.
Right.
Oh, right. So I made a little note here about how he uses sound. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, there's all this like bubbling and gurgling and like, I don't know, there's like, I love word art in comics, and I feel like he does it in some really interesting ways.
It's funny because I was thinking about this page as it reminded me of a Miyazaki moment.
It's super cinematic.
Where there's like this train going by but this beautiful connection to nature now, which as you say is the sound is doing that, and then the visuals of
they're cutaways, right? It's like they're cutaway that you would have in film.
Yep, and so there's a big panel, right, and then these insets are all kind of, and he uses the insets a fair amount in this book too. Every single one is like a masterful drawing and painting.
Yeah,
it just is unbelievable.
These are one of these comics when I'm reading it, I'm always like, how is like not everyone freaking out about this all the time?
Yeah.
Like it's so good.
Yeah, don't people understand this is a work of genius that I don't know how long it took him, but it is so. And if you look at his blog or which is still there, he's got just the pencils. The pencil drawings alone are like fantastic, and that's not even going it back in to add the color, which must have been incredibly time consuming also, but it's just phenomenal.
This part is a little story within the story, which I always love.
Like a myth.
Yeah.
A local town myth. Yeah, stories within the stories, me too.
It's almost like a little like short or something.
And so he changes the color to let us know, right? Like it's not a flashback, but another story, and there's the inset again, and he's in our regular color palette telling us what time he's in, and then the background is this myth, this origin story of the town and the Lantern Festival.
Right.
And the lanterns have these fish drawn on them, which is going to become significant later on. And they have different view. The bear has a different view about what the lanterns are versus what the kids think they are.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of the reality versus magic conversation going on.
Yeah. Is it like worth it talking about it now, or should we wait till we get there?
I don't know. Well, it's a good question. I think. Does he say? Does the bear? I can't remember if he sort of tells them.
He tells them that he's looking for fish.
Right. Okay.
And they're looking to see where these lanterns go. I think we can just talk about it.
Yeah. Right. Spoiler alert. If you're gonna watch this channel, we're gonna tell you the end of the book.
So ultimately, what happens is that these lanterns, they lose them and they find them, and it's this big long journey.
Yeah. And
then the lanterns transform into the fish.
Yep.
Right. And so it's like their two paths converge. And he's got that huge basket, and this sequence is so good.
There it is, yeah. And I think it's fine to go out of order, right?
Totally.
Just sort of looking at all this in retrospect, because he jumps on that lantern, and there it's transforming.
Yeah. So right, exactly. So there's. Oh, can you go back to that one for a second? So there's a lot of story stuff happening here, right? Where it's when you leave, the boys are on a journey of transformation, right? They're turning into grown-ups. They're leaving childhood behind. And then these lanterns are transforming. And the whole thing culminates in an action sequence. And there's part of me that was thinking what is action? What is one element that Ben is going through this whole story is that he's not taking action. Ben is he's the narrator, he's the main kid.
Yeah.
He sees his friends being cruel to Nathaniel, and he doesn't take action. They get stuck at this one point. It's this really great part of the story where they're kind of almost trapped by a witch, in this weird potion factory, and Nathaniel's loving it, and he's finding all these books and doing all this stuff, and then you see this amazing aquarium, but Ben is not taking action. He doesn't like it, and then it culminates with the bear, and ultimately Ben and Nathaniel, but now they're in action, right? And they're motivating the story and doing this thing. I don't know. I just thought it was
yeah. There is this big payoff here where they've been searching and seeking, and now the bear is they've got what they want. They're getting the lanterns, and the bear is getting, and we're finding out the lanterns are indeed fish.
Right. They see where the lanterns go. It's there's a great panel in the beginning where they're do they sink to the bottom? Do they float up into the sky?
Right.
What happens? And here we see that they turn into these glowing fish.
Which these layouts are just...
It's gorgeous.
So wonderful to look at. and he just drops the dialogue altogether as we watch it happen.
And like the lighting too. The lighting is so amazing, right? It's just the white of the paper at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
Which again, it's like that omission thing, right? It's like you get into these rhythms and then you change it, and it just creates this drama.
So beautiful. Okay, we'll get back here, I guess.
Oh yeah, this was another craft thing I thought was really interesting, which is the way that he does word bubbles.
Yeah, right.
Which is no line work.
Oh yeah, does he do that the whole time?
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that. That is so interesting.
Which is something that I feel like I'm always bumping up against, as like you have these like lines and these bubbles that, like in prose, you're never aware that when it's good, you're not aware that you're reading.
Yeah.
But there's something about comics, and I think it has to do with the line work around the bubbles, that you're like, now I'm reading this bubble, now I'm reading that bubble. But omitting the lines, I don't know, I think it's awesome. I think it makes the text flow. Like, I think it's easier to read, and I think visually it's really cool.
I agree. He does use them occasionally, but that's only because the page is white right there.
Yeah, totally.
But where there's color, it's just, he just leaves them. And it's funny that that's like invisible ink too. Like Ryan McDonald's invisible ink, where I didn't even necessarily know it, but those decisions that cartoonists make are so important and so well thought out that you don't always notice it right away, but it doesn't mean it's not important.
Yeah, it's this like, and it's this thing too where like making comics, it's this amazing mix of writing and visual art, and it's like, how do those things talk to each other? Like, how do they react? I don't know. It's great.
I mean, also along those lines, did you notice the text?
You mean the lettering?
The lettering, yeah. Did you notice, like, there was a moment where I thought it was where he had digitized his own lettering and used it. But it's not. It's hand lettered. It's all hand lettered, which I really love in comics when people hand letter, because it's subtly different. And there's different ways to go about that. But his lettering is so good.
It's really good.
And I was like, you can tell when you look at a W, like a W here and a W there and a W there, like they're slightly different. I think.
Yeah, it's funny.
I don't know.
Like,
can you notice like?
I would guess that it's hand lettered, and I don't have like super strong feelings about it one way or the other. Like, I think if someone is using a font that looks good, like I think that's fine. But I think, and lettering is, I guess part of it too is like it's so hard to do it good.
I know, yeah.
That it is amazing.
I don't mind it when it's not noticeable, but sometimes digitized lettering can be really distracting.
Yeah, oh, totally.
So as long as it's done well, like either it's one way or the other for him, and it's very elegant. And along the lines of lettering, it's like this wall of words right there.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because this is a great comics methodology of like one person talking over the other person. You literally put the word bubble on top of the other one.
Totally, it's great. Oh my gosh.
I know, this one. This is like, again, it made me think of Miyazaki a little bit, but the scale on this is just like, you just really, and the light.
I know, there's part of it's like, if you saw this in a gallery, like you would just be blown away.
Yeah.
And you get to hold it in your hand. You know what I mean?
I wonder if he sells his originals.
Yeah.
It's all on paper, so.
And this is really cool too, right? So it's like we're almost halfway, and like now the color started to drain.
Yeah,
it's like he's totally using
gray.
color to like guide you through this story.
This magnet trip.
Yeah, it was really fun. Oh yeah, I thought this was really neat. Well, because there's an element to comics that I really love, which is like diagrammatical.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's something
Definitely.
about, and like here he's like literally showing us a diagram
of
how to do this like makeshift compass. It's just like a great like, crossing over of narrative and drawing and diagrams and story, and I don't know, it's awesome.
And like the use of the panels to create time and like in this diagrammatic way. So there's like the leaf is slowly turning and you've got 5 panels to do that, so it really just gives you an opportunity to see. You can actually see the leaf move.
Yeah,
it's simple, but that's a choice someone very easily could have just drawn like 1 or 2 panels, but it's just so well thought out that he does that.
He does a lot of really nice stuff with time. Like in the beginning, there's lots of nice stuff with like the trees going by. It gives you that feeling like when you're on a bike and like
speed, rushing.
Yeah.
Again, there's the color shift.
there's this great part here in the story where Nathaniel, who's kind of like, he's a little bit the heart of the story, but they're stuck behind this like cliff wall, and he's like, I'll climb it.
Yeah.
And he climbs it, and he's like, I can't get down.
Right. He doesn't make it very far.
It totally reminds me of my kids.
Yeah, totally.
They're
Like this seems like a really good idea right now, and then like,
I'm stuck.
this is not a good idea.
And we totally had this. I love story structure. Like I love the like, whatever Campbellian like hero's journey and story circle and all this stuff. And like at this point, it's like he totally gives him the magical item.
Yep.
Right.
The
it's
boon.
Like,
yep.
Yeah. He's like here. Like he gives him this scarf that his wife made him and like wraps it around him as like a sweater. And this comes back.
Yeah. Right. And also Ben makes fun of him for it constantly.
Yeah.
And it becomes a plot point in terms of. But yeah, it returns later on.
Yeah. No, it totally. I feel like it always comes back as to like how are like, what kind of person are you gonna be? You know what I mean? Are you gonna be the kind of person who's like on board and having fun, or are you gonna be the kind of person who's like constantly worried about what people think of you? And you know what I mean? It's
right. And that's Ben and Nathaniel. That's these two characters.
Yeah.
And the truth is, we're probably a little of both. But
yeah, totally.
Maybe we want to be more like Nathaniel than Ben. I don't know. Although Ben, kind of comes around in the end.
Yeah.
He takes the whole book, really, to get there.
But like to his credit, like he sticks with it. You know, where all the other kids bailed.
Yes,
like Ben sticks with it, and it's like.
And do you think he does just for the sake of fulfilling the pact? Or is it because there's a part of him that's like, I have to accept this other kid?
I mean, I remember feeling as a kid, like being worried about hurting someone's feelings. You know, like feeling like someone was being excluded and being worried about that.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's part of that isn't it? I think it's in the narration, he's reflecting on it, right? It's like, it feels like there's remorse in the narration.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I think he does know, like somewhere in him, like what the right thing to do is.
There's another inset here with this just big splash page.
I'm always afraid of doing tiny figures like this.
Oh yeah, how come?
I don't know. I just feel like it's like not. It's like it's too easy or something like that. You know?
Yeah.
But like it looks so good. Like
I
these
love them.
huge landscapes are so great.
Well, it just gives you a context of scale for where they're at.
Oh, totally. I wonder how big he draws. I bet you it's not that much bigger than this.
Yeah, I should look again because it's on the blog. He's got a lot of the pencils lying on the page for scale, so you can kind of see. I think it's not too much bigger than this. This composition's great too, like these panels pointing down to them right there.
That's awesome. It is. It's like an hourglass. If you go back,
Yep.
it's like these are going up and this is going down. It's like everything's pointing to these guys right here. That's a great.
It's like the yellow. They're talking on the phone here, so this yellow box is just like a really old technique of it's like jagged zigzag line to tell you it's like an electronic sound.
Yeah, right. It's like
the voice is different because the color is different. And then this. Oh, okay. This page just blew me away. Like they're getting on this thing like tram, which is going to take them up, and this is such a kid thing. Like it's like, how did they think of this? Like here he is, right? Like he's on the tram, but then he leans back and looks at his friend, and we know that because then he can see Ben upside down, and then here, and then there he's upside down again, and then he flips over, and it's just this pacing is so. It's like he knows kids too, or he remembers his childhood or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
And look at how many little panels there are too. Because that's the other thing is if this was just a book for younger kids, you'd really only have like 3 to 6 panels per page. I think. Yeah. And he does that sometimes, right? Like this is 5, but then over here look at all these. There's so many.
And it's like it's the contrast, right, between like these tiny little panels and then a huge landscape spread.
Yeah.
It's like it's so fun. It's so great.
I know. I'd love to have a conversation with him and ask him about how he decided to break the panels up. I mean, how that decision making happened. And they're going up the tram. They're starting to see these like these sort of mountainous houses poking up out of.
Yeah, and there's like other stuff. It's like there's like all this kind of like other other stories happening that they're just passing by.
It's such a journey. This is such an epic journey story that involves going from one place to another, coming out of the clouds, colors changing again, and then this warm.
That's a great.
We're getting into this warm color now when they go inside. So there, it's still limited palette, but he's switched it. Now we're like pinks and oranges.
And so, yeah, you had mentioned before, like, this feels very Miyazaki.
Yeah, this warm light. This character is reminiscent of the character in Spirited Away to me, who's making all the potions. The guy with
The furnace guy.
Yeah, with all the arms.
Yeah.
And she's got a similar feeling to her, although she's a little bit more sinister, or not sinister, but like harsh, more stern. And didn't your kid say something about what did?
Yeah, they had because there's this part where they meet this giant bird here. And,
Oh yeah.
And for some reason, when my girls read this, they were like, at this point, you would go home.
Yeah.
they were like, now you would turn
get
back.
out of here.
Yeah. They're like, so something about it didn't sit right with them, but it's totally it has that Miyazaki thing, and it also reminds me it's a little bit of that Roald Dahl thing, and where it's like there's danger.
Yes.
Like it's a kid's story, but kids get hurt.
Yep.
You know, like people
and
get hurt.
I think about Maurice Sendak a lot. Was always said the same thing, which was, kids feel fear and danger in an intense way, and to not put that in a book is really not authentic to them.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think that there are moments of danger in this book, or my son would call it creepiness. Oh, that's creepy. That just got creepy. And I like that.
And I think kids are keen audiences. It's like they know when you're talking down to them or you got kid gloves on. You know what I mean? It's like they don't want to read something that's gonna be boring and just safe.
Yeah, right. They'll put it down if they do.
Yeah.
They'll put the book down.
Oh yeah, the map stuff is amazing.
Yeah, the map's really great. The bird draws the map.
But it's so funny because in contrast, earlier the bear brings a map out. Remember that? And it's just like a line.
Right. With no landmarks on it. It was like the starting point and the destination.
I mean, and maps are a huge part, I feel like, of the fantasy genre. Like, I love drawing maps in our books. And it's like, he really works it into the story. Like, it's a plot point. Like, getting the map is a big part of their...
Absolutely. And the other problem is now they have to pay for the map, which they thought she was just offering to give them the map. But here we go. She's demanding that they pay for the map, and they don't have any money. And I like how she explains capitalism here. She doesn't call it that, but she's like, you can't just like go to a comic book store and people just give you a bunch of comics, right? There was something I wanted to point out. I should have marked it. Is it? There's a little Easter egg in there. Did you notice the books on the shelf at one point? Or did you notice that? Nemo's Lucid Dream Pattern. So Little Nemo in Slumberland by Winsor McCay, which is an old comic strip. So like, are they in a big dream right now? I kind of wonder what's going on. It's a little hint.
Yeah, and there is kind of like
dream world.
There's totally like that, like Winsor McCay's like fastidious like pencil work.
Yeah.
It's there definitely are like influences there.
Yeah, and the sort of stream of consciousness that Winsor McCay used in the plots. So then she throws them in the basement.
Yeah.
And the color changes again.
And this part is great. And so, I was kind of trying to figure this out too. So there's that whole idea about like masks, in Campbell's work, and like characters wearing different masks, or being able to like archetypes changing. Like at one point, a character could be a mentor, but then that character could be a trickster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's something here about like when they so for one of the first creatures of the underworld that they meet is the bear, and then Nathaniel finds this bear mask.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I almost wonder if it's kind of like now he's like a part of this world now.
Yeah, he's joined into it, and that mask is helping him bridge the gap.
And it's like they're trapped in this basement. They have to do these like almost Herculean chores, but he's totally into it. Like he loves it.
Oh, I like your note right there. Not making decisions can be just as bad as making the wrong decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you have to make decisions, right?
And it feels like that's Ben's whole thing. Like is that he's like not participating.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He's not. It's also like the first rule of improv is yes and.
Yeah.
You should always like say yes and add something on. And,
Right, you're continuing it.
And that's what Nathaniel does in every single scene of the book, but Ben is not doing that.
Yeah. And I wonder if there's a way of, it's like not making a decision, not participating, is a way of turning back. You know what I mean? He's like breaking his own pact.
Yeah, that's right.
This color is awesome. I love that, like that limey green.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real simple.
We were talking. Oh no, isn't this so good? The cross section.
Like,
oh, it's awesome.
Cutaway right there. It's really cool.
It's diagram.
Yep.
I love it. Yeah, this guy is great. He totally knows what he's doing. You feel like you're in good hands reading this book.
Yeah. I think it's his first graphic novel too, right? Like he did a bunch of comics that you can find on the web, but I don't think. I think this is the only. Yeah, and I just wonder how long. I always want to know how long these masterpieces take.
Yeah. I always wonder too, like when I'm like breaking down stories and stuff like this, I'm like, and we were talking about this a little bit too, like how much of this is like baked in to his writing, like how much of it is intentional, and how much of it is just like, like this is the way we communicate. You see these patterns and these things pop up, like it's just kind of like, you know what I'm saying? It's just like kind of a natural way of telling a story.
Mm-hmm. I want to know, like I'm not sure if you're saying this, but like what did he plan versus how did it just kind of unravel?
So this is the scarf coming back to save him. Like, so this is kind of an interesting part of the story because Ben gets out, but then he comes back to rescue his friend.
Yeah, he almost leaves. Yeah. And as you're reading it, he creates this moment of discomfort where you're like, oh, wait a minute, don't leave your friend. You know, like you really think he's going to do it.
Yeah. And it does feel like at this point he's turned, right? Yeah. He's like on board now.
Yeah, he's made a choice to accept this other kid.
Accurate to how kids and how grown-ups should make up. Oh yeah, I thought this was awesome. Because Ben says something really awful to Nathaniel. What is it? It's right before Ben splits. They're in the basement. I think it's before this.
He says a lot of awful things.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's like,
oh, that's right.
You found this place. Well, you were just going to skip all rock, blah, blah, blah. At least I made a decision to do something. Yeah, and look how that turned out. About as well as your decision to talk to that bear. It took him 10 minutes. He was lost.
He says something to the effect, right, of like, he should have left him behind or something like that, I think.
I wish you just had stayed home.
Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, and there's a great thing here, too, where it's like, they're supposed to be cleaning this aquarium, and it's like the dirt and the fuzz is like obscuring them, right?
It's closing in around them.
So yeah, he does this awful thing, like, I wish you should have stayed home. And then their makeup here, and then the way they make up is, they're like, say, let's call it a truce.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I really like that, too.
And like the truce like language felt so kid to me. Like I remember that.
Yeah.
Being like, okay, truce. Mm-hmm. And then it's like you can kind of just like, it's a way to like pause and like step and move forward. And it's like there's part of it's like I love how kids do that, and I wonder that should be something that grown-ups can do more easily.
Right. Totally. Which is like, are you saying I forgive you? Is that what a truce is to some degree?
I think it's a way of saying,
or is it like
it's a way of saying like I'm sorry with saving face.
Yeah.
You know?
Uh-huh.
And then he brings a mask for Ben. He's like, let's call a truce and we can be friends again, and now we can both be part of this world.
Uh-huh. And he finally puts the hat on. He's like, this is the first time he's accepting the offer from this other kid. So they really have turned the corner now, and you feel like they're both in this adventure together. This dog walking on the water is really great.
It's
too.
awesome.
And they're like, how can you do that? Then they go into this cave.
Yeah, just the color in here is just gorgeous. And then this creature comes back.
Creature, yeah.
It's almost like he's a manifestation of like fear or something.
Yeah, or like, is it adulthood, or I don't know, or what we can become if we're not careful or something? I don't know. Like, there's something human about it too that is.
That's a great drawing of the dog. See, that's why I
Yeah.
feel like you can really see like the edge of the
pencil
pencil
line,
in
yeah,
there.
totally.
That's why I think it's maybe he's not drawing huge, you know.
Yeah. And they meet up with the bear again.
The bear's back.
And they have this awkward moment where they think that he's like upset about the bear heads they're wearing on their heads.
Yeah, he mistakes them for bears at first.
Yeah, right. Which actually, I think the bears he mistakes them for, he says the name of two bears, and they turn out to be the bears later in this scene here.
Samson and Brutus.
Yeah, I think, isn't that right? I think he says, Samson, Brutus, is that you? No, I'm curious. I have to go back and see. Yeah, Samson, Brutus.
Oh, I didn't pick that up. That's right.
And so there's like, and then there's this like star chart, which is our star chart that we know in our universe. But then the bear says, "Oh, did you even notice this other star chart?" Which is like the paw of Kragan the Brave, the Honeymaker's provision, the ever mischievous, though on occasion helpful and kind, Samson and Brutus.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that splash page is fantastic. It's like, I feel like he's just taking joy too. Every once in a while when you see those big pages, you're like, he just loves making comics.
Yeah, you can totally tell when someone loves drawing.
It's a great splash page too.
Yeah, Nathaniel has figured it out here. It's like he got this book from the witchy lady, and it's like he's like putting it all together. Which I feel like is another kind of story trope, right? Like the kid who seems like the weak link actually having the key.
Is the strong kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. The nerdy kid.
Yeah. There's all this stuff in here too that just feels like such childhood stuff, like floating in like water at night.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
like I don't know, it all just feels like real like moments from childhood. Yeah, they got this soup from the bear.
Oh, this is an interesting situation. I love these ocean scenes, but then they end up meeting these. I guess they're these wise. It's the wise. What do they call them? The wise people. Or something like that.
That's right. This part was pretty wild.
It's just so psychedelic, and it only happens for like 3 pages.
Yeah.
You're like, who are these people? They're very big.
Yeah.
They're very dreamlike, and it's just this like little interlude, and then they're gone.
They're part of a festival, and I feel like they mentioned this festival when they first, when there's those buildings that are jutting out of the clouds. Like I think there's a relationship.
Yeah, and
there.
the witchy woman also mentioned this is the one night every year when they come to visit. I think.
Right.
Right.
And like the boys are part of this lantern festival in their world. It's like all these parallels between these two worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Mirror. What does Brian McDonald call that? Like mirror plot points or mirror clone
clone
plots,
characters.
clone characters.
Yeah. Right. No, the bear is totally a clone character of them. It's
Yeah.
like he's totally like going on his own journey.
So we talked about this before, but this is sort of the wrap up, and I guess we could maybe close out the book here because he catches the fish, and then it's sort of time for them to part ways.
Right.
And there's the fish going up into the
And I guess
Milky Way.
You could kind of see it as like a synthesis now, right? Where it's like the road that they were on, the river that they were following, the fish that they're following, they're going into the sky. Like everything is like synthesizing into like one thing, right?
It's all converging. So great.
So yeah, we actually forgot to talk about this, but there's one point in the story where Nathaniel's talking about a time when they were younger and they were looking through one of their parents' libraries and they found a book on astronomy.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, we can like look at these constellations in the book and then look at them in our telescope and like how much fun they used to have together.
Yeah, right.
You know?
They address their childhood.
Yeah,
And their friendship.
And then here, and when the story's over, they decide they do this great. There's this great little bit of dialogue where Nathaniel's like, "We should come here every year, just us two. Deal." But but it's like, so to me, I felt like, oh, this was maybe a new pact or a renewing of the pact that they once had.
Yeah.
And I kind of was seeing this as like, you have to exit childhood.
Yeah, there's no way out. You can't stay a child.
There's no way out.
You gotta grow up.
But you don't have to do it alone.
Okay, I like that.
And like that maybe is the pact that they were, like, that's the true pact. It's like the pact that they had when they were kids, like, we can have fun together, we can do this together, is renewed here. And it's like, you can do that. Like, you can't go home, you have to move forward, but you don't have to do it alone.
Right. You kind of need to, you actually need people to go forward.
Right. Him leaving Nathaniel alone was the problem.
Yeah, right. And then they make this decision that they're gonna circumnavigate the earth. They're not even going home still.
Yeah.
And that's just like such a wild way to end the book. It's like, is it a cliffhanger? Is there a second book of them circumnavigating the world? Is it
right? What's that journey
just
gonna be
them?
like?
Is circumnavigating the world like them crossing into adulthood?
And isn't this like another synthesis here? It's like the road turning into the Milky Way,
just like the fish did early on. Yeah,
it's
totally.
so great.
Absolutely.
Nice. That was fun. That
so
felt good.
That book is just absolutely amazing.
I want to see that real quick. Okay. Okay. So, what do you think? Would you recommend this book?
Yes, absolutely would recommend this book. Amazing. I think it's probably great for a middle grade audience, although it might be a little bit over their heads. It's not inappropriate. It just might be a little esoteric for them. Although I think, it depends on the kid, but I think it goes right up until YA. And even maybe adults might get a kick out of it just because it's so beautiful.
Oh, totally.
What about you?
Yeah, I definitely would recommend this book. Like, I think it's beautiful. I love the artwork. I love the story. I'm totally in line with what Brian said. I think like 9 up would feel good to me. Like, I think parents would really dig it. Like, it's really rereadable. Lots of stuff to get on, like little nuances and little Easter eggs on your second read. Yeah, I loved it.
Fantastic. Check it out.
Okay, so now this is going to be, should I just jump into it?
Yeah, jump into it.
Okay, this is going to be our little plug section. So Brian and I are both like working artists, and so we're just going to talk a little bit about our books. I am one half of the creative team, Dan and Jason. I'm the Dan half. And so we have a couple book series out. One is Blueberry and Pancakes. This is our emerging reader graphic novel series. Full disclosure, this is also published by First Second Books. And these are stories. They're all stories about friendship. It's these 3 friends, Blue, who's this little worm, Berry, who's this frog, and Pancakes, who's this big yellow rabbit. And it's just about how friends screw up and make mistakes, but you can talk about them and figure them out. And they're just like silly and wacky and fun. And then we have another middle grade graphic novel series, Barb the Last Berserker. And the 3rd book in the Barb series comes out in August, so definitely get your hands on this if you have like a comedy or adventure fan in your family.
Those books are so good. You can check out my work too. I have self-published some comics. This is Ebb and Flood, which follows a small fictional seaside town and sort of the ghosts and the people who live there. I have some other comic anthologies as well. You can check all of this stuff out by going to brianherrick.com. I've been an art teacher for 25 years, and you can also look at my YouTube channel, Mountain Tide Studio, where I've got art lessons on there and process videos about making art. So check that out. And please subscribe to this channel. That will help us out, and you'll hear about more books as we move forward.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks for being here.